how I'd like Vinder to be remembered is a company that brought an old way of living that we used to have for hundreds of years and allowed that to reemerge and bring that style back into our community using 21st century technology. It's something that can happen in every society, and it's something that brings, in a world that's so divided right now, it allows us to bring people together through food. What's more human than that, you know?
On this week's episode of Establishing Your Empire, Sam Lillie. After college, Sam decided to solo hike over 2,600 miles all the way from Mexico to Canada, called the PCT. For the first 40 minutes of this podcast, we talk about the trials and tribulations of that hike. And then we go into how he started, came up with the idea, and how he currently runs his company, Vinder, which is a marketplace where you can buy, sell, and trade local produce. And I'm very excited to present this week's episode of Establishing Your Empire. You're listening to the Establishing Your Empire show, a podcast that inspires entrepreneurs, creatives, and future business owners to pursue their passions, grow their organizations, and build their empire. My name is Daran Herrman, and creatively, I'm best known for my photography. But business-wise, my claim to fame is growing a company from $15K per month in online sales to breaking the $1 million a month barrier. And I'm sitting down with interesting people to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how they have established their empires. Hi, Sam, and welcome to my podcast.
Hey, Darren, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming by. So why don't you give us a little background information of who you are, what you do, how you got started, that type of stuff.
Sure. My name's Sam Lillie. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vinder, and Vinder is an online neighbor-made farmers market with a vision to create the largest neighbor-made grocery store that doesn't hold any inventory, doesn't own any delivery vehicles, and is owned by the very people who use it. I'm 29. I went to school at San Jose State. I got a degree in business. That didn't help me much with entrepreneurship. I'm from San Diego originally, went to San Jose State. Once I graduated from San Jose State, I hiked from Mexico to Canada on the Pacific Crest Trail. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, well, I am familiar with it, not as in I've hiked it.
Yeah.
I've read about it and I've seen photos and I've driven near it,
yep.
But that's about it.
It's 2,658.8 miles.
Wow.
And that 0.8 counts. And it took me about 5 months to hike it. I solo hiked it. And it completely changed my outlook on life and of who I am. And then when I finished that, I went back to San Diego. It goes all the way to Canada, right? And I had shaved my head and shaved my face and then didn't touch it for 5 months. And so it was 5 months of pure, unadulterated growth. You know? And it was just wild. And then went back down to San Diego, got cleaned up. And I was there about a month and freaked out. I was claustrophobic. You know, I'd been alone in the backcountry for the better half of 5 months. And I got used to talking to myself, talking to trees and the wind and thinking for a long period of time. And when I went back to San Diego, I got claustrophobic. There was too many people. I was out hiking daily, and not just 5 miles on the PCT. I was averaging 25 miles a day through mountains with 40 to 45 pounds in my pack. So when I get to San Diego and hike, it's not nearly as mountainous. There's some mountains, but it's more hilly than what I was used to. And I was doing 17 miles a day by noon. You know, if I'd get there at like 9 or 6 in the morning, probably closer to 6 in the morning, get done at noon, and I'd done 17 miles. Get my day started.
17 miles is quite a bit. So I was a Boy Scout growing up, and we did Film Mountain, New Mexico, which is this big hiking kind of famous Boy Scout trek. And I did 79 miles in 10 days. Of course, I was a teenager, and unfortunately, my two older brothers went. So my pack was like the lightest coming in because they're like, oh, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this. So then since I had the lightest pack coming in, I had the heaviest pack probably after they gave me all the pots and pans and stuff. But yeah, 10, 11 miles is a lot. And you were averaging more than that.
25, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually don't want to get off this yet because this is something I did not know about you at all. So I guess what got you to just decide, hey, I'm going to do this whole huge trek? Or did you just kind of slightly start and then keep going?
Oh, no, I planned it for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did a 3-day, 10-mile hike, 10 miles in 3 days. It was summit a mountain, San Gorgonio in Southern California. It's, I don't know, 6,000 to 8,000 feet. Nothing crazy. The highest in the United States, you're looking between 14,000, 15,000 feet. And I had just done this with my dad and stepbrother, and we had just finished. And I saw this pamphlet at the ranger station with my stepbrother of the Pacific Crest Trail, you know, Mexico to Canada, walking the entire west coast of the country, you know, the entire length of the country. And we thought, well, man, we just had a great time doing this, you know, being in the backcountry, setting up camp, but having a fire. You know, why wouldn't we want to do this for however long it might take? So we thought, well, we're both going to graduate in about 3 years. Why don't we do it around then? And then every year we would start doing a longer and longer hike to make sure that we liked being outside for that amount of time. We did 1 week and then we did a 2 week. 70 miles through the High Sierra Trail and the John Muir Trail, which is 220 miles, which goes from Yosemite to Mount Whitney south.
And I think just because I've done some, nothing compared to you, but 7-8 days is a lot different than just 3-4 days.
Yeah.
So, and obviously 4 months is way different than that too, but that's when things start sitting in, like food, like you start missing some food that you really don't actually miss, because by the time you have it again, it doesn't taste like you thought, and it's way too sweet or spicy or whatever. Just like you start not needing a lot of that stuff, but your brain changes in about a week of not seeing people.
Massively.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. So we did this for the 2 week, and then about 6 months before the start of the hike, I got a phone call from him, and he was like, hey, I'm out. I'm not going to do it. And I was like, well, fuck. Like, I've never done solo backpacking before. So I thought about it. I spent a couple weeks thinking about it. I've been training and prepping myself mentally and physically for a few years. And said, fuck it. You know, I'm going to go.
It's kind of like almost you're doing this championship bout and the guy you're going to fight against gets injured. It's like, well, I still want to, I'm in shape. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Like, let's lace it up.
Yeah.
So maybe just because I think this is super interesting, like talk about cost. Like walk me through like how much was preparation and maybe your average week, month, day, whatever, however you can sum up that make it easier for us to consume.
Sure. It cost me a little over $4,000. It's about $2 a mile.
Wow. Now you have that down to a science. You have a lot of time to think about that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Tons of time. I already had a lot of the equipment because I had bought it over a 3-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to make sure I had quality equipment, right? That would last. And then I plotted out my resupply points and prepping for it. I trained knowing that my stepbrother kind of backed out on it. Then I prepped for 6 months I bought a 40-pound weight vest and I wore it from when I woke up at 6 a.m. until I went to sleep. And I was in college. And so I was going to class in it, and I was going to work in it. I was grocery shop, everything, because I knew my pack was going to weigh 40 pounds. And so I needed to get my thighs, my legs and my back prepped. And it worked. I mean, I hit my first day, I hit 20 miles. And for those who don't know, when you first start, your first 700 miles is through the desert. And it kind of goes through the Mojave a little bit. You're talking 20 miles between water sources. I carried 6 liters of water on my back and still had a ration, right? It's 105. Most people every day, 105, no cover. You're just walking through the desert.
Yeah.
And most people start April 22nd, Earth Day. And it's also a timing thing because you want to just miss the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, so you can get through.
But before summer.
But before summer, so you can get through the desert without it being scorching hot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had to finish college, right? And so I took my last final. I didn't walk across the stage. I had my own walk to do, And so I took my last final, and that same day drove down to San Diego from San Jose, so South San Francisco-ish. And 3 days after that final, I had went to the Mexican-American border, looked at the fence, looked left, looked right. There was a hole in it, and so I looked through it, and then slapped it as hard as I could, and turned around and went north, and started the trek from there.
That's amazing.
I mean, you're talking 105 every day. I had 15 rattlesnake encounters. There's one area where you're going through a couple miles it's about 2 miles of what's called poodle dog bush. It looks like it came out of a Dr. Seuss book. It's green and purple and extremely poisonous to the skin, right? Worse than poison ivy or, poison oak. And it'll cause itchiness and a little swelling and redness and stuff. And I remember at one point I was walking down this thing, and it mainly grows in burnout areas. And so Southern California is prone to just tons of fires. And at this point, I remember walking, and then all of a sudden I saw what looked like a corn maze, but of this poisonous stuff, and it's all around. And it's 105, and I bring my sleeves down. I put pants on. I've got, a collar turned up, got trekking poles, and I get up to this wall of just death. and I remember it was all overgrown. There's a trail that's well marked, but the plants had overgrown the trail. So I took my poles and I was pushing this stuff and trying to get around it, and then continuously walking. And I remember picking up a bunch of this stuff with the trekking poles, and as I had it over my head, I hear this and there's this rattlesnake, biggest one I've ever seen in my life. And it's in a full coil, sitting 2.5, 3 feet from me, staring directly into my eyes with its cold, dark, solid black eyeballs of death, and licking the air at me, right? Ready.
Right.
And I'm sitting there, 105. I'm sweating. I'm in the desert by myself with this just everything that wants to kill me around me. And I'm thinking, how the fuck did I want to do this? And I start looking at the snake, and I start talking to it. Hey, man, I don't have a problem with you. Just trying to be cool here. You can be on your way. I'll be on my way. And after a few minutes, ended up just slithering off.
Yeah. It's almost like, tell me what you want me to do to the snake.
Yeah.
I grew up in the country, so I don't think it's as weird to talk to animals. I think we always kind of did that in some form or fashion, whether it was out loud or not. But it's almost like you could kind of somewhat communicate with them.
Yeah.
At least you think you can. But it sounds like it worked out.
Yeah.
So this huge trek, what was something that you wish you would have learned or known before you started that you knew during it or after?
About what?
Anything. So you have this whole trek. You had to have some kind of, whether it's equipment or some type of, planning or thought process or anything. So, maybe some value there as somebody that wants to do this trek. Like, what would you recommend for them?
If you're going to do it, if you're going to prep for it, you can prep out any kind of supply points you want. All that shit goes out the window because you never know what's going to happen. I had it all planned out. None of it worked. And that's a lot like business.
Right. Sure. Completely.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of similarities. I didn't do an inventory check, right? And ran out of food about halfway through one of my 1 week sprints. And so I just booked it for a little over a day. I did almost 40 miles in a day and got out into the town. And I ended up walking like John Wayne, my knees and everything was given out. And so I would say inventory check, don't forget to do that. Think back, take a minute, breathe, sort it out, look through your stuff, plan ahead. It doesn't take much time. It really does. If I just took the time to look at the bag of food I had and spent the time looking at it, how many days it's going to take, I would have known I would have been short.
Yeah, as opposed to assuming, but it's like, oh, and how many times have you checked inventory? So many times, so it's easy to forget.
Yeah, I was like 2 months into the thing, and I was like, I know what I'm doing. Wrong. Very wrong. And California itself, it goes through California, Oregon, and Washington, kind of straight up. And California itself took me 3 months to get through. It's a long, long state. You get halfway and you're not even through California. Halfway through the PCT, you're not through California. I also learned a lot about myself, what I'm capable of accomplishing, as well as enduring. From blizzards, I had full whiteout blizzards. I had to go 20 miles through one of them, whited out the trail. That one I remember, I was in Oregon around Three Sisters Mountains near Bend. And it was raining all day. This one wasn't that bad. It was a 4-day sprint, right? So you get into a town, you see where your next one is, and you see, okay, how many miles is that? I'm doing about 20 a day, 80 miles, about 4 days, so much food, that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And about 2 days into this, so this is day 3, and it had rained all night. Great, and wake up in the morning, still raining. Fine. Eat, pack up, you get outside, you were getting rained on, all your stuff's wet. Not new, right? I wasn't like, oh, this sucks. I'm just like, oh, this is just another day, right? And you get comfortable being uncomfortable, which again relates to business a lot. And I pack up and I start heading out, and I've got my down jacket on, and then a rain jacket on top of that, so it doesn't get wet. For those who don't know, down when it gets wet doesn't insulate. And so I remember taking off, and a couple hours in, it starts snowing, and I'm like, all right, not the first time I've been through snow. When I went through the Sierra Nevadas, where we averaged 10,000 feet of elevation, it snowed on and off, hailstorms, things like that, tons of lightning. So it wasn't that big of a deal. And so I continued to walk, and then it got heavier and heavier and heavier. And then I was in a full-blown blizzard where it just widened the trail out. And I remember being a little hungry because I was burning about 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day, taking in maybe 2,000, right? Maybe. And ended up losing 20, 30 pounds. And at this point, I remember being hungry, took shelter underneath a tree, and reached into my pocket to pull out a snack bar, right? And I couldn't open the package. My hands were shaking. It was cold. I was thinking, what the fuck? I should be warm. I've got this down jacket on. I've been hiking, right?
Mm-hmm,
and I'm thinking, what are the possibilities here? Like, oh man, I wonder if I've been sweating through this thing.
Oh yeah, forget about that.
Yeah. So I unzipped the rain jacket. I unzipped it down a little bit, and I had a button-up shirt similar to this one. And I put my hand against my chest, and I pull it out, and it's just soaked. And I touch my down, and it just sticks, so it's soaked through. And there's no insulation. So here I am, alone, in the backcountry wilderness in Three Sisters Mountains of Oregon, with no insulation of a down jacket in the middle of this blizzard. Thinking, fuck. Do I turn around and go back the 2.5 days of hiking, right, to get to the town? Do I set up my tent here and seek shelter and get in my bag? Well, then I've lost time. I've consumed food that I only had a limited amount for. Or do I move forward? My decision was to move forward, right? Whether or not other people agree that I should have was to them, but I decided to do that. So I put on Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. And I put it on headphones, and I thought, fuck it, I'm going. And just did it. And I had, you can see their little white diamonds like that on the trees that let you know that you're on trail.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I started using those and kept following the trail that way.
Because it's not like you want to pull out your compass at this stage either. You know, your hands are frozen and
yeah,
tough
exactly. I had a map and compass on me, but at this point, it was more of like I need to get moving.
Don't stop.
Right,
Yeah.
I need to move to maintain heat
and get the rhythm going. Right, you know, pulling out, rechecking. That can get a pause going, and the pauses get you thinking.
Yeah,
perhaps on the right way. Just
Yeah, I mean, I had to think of whether or not I wanted to move forward, or there's the potential of hypothermia, pneumonia, all of that. It was snowing. I was in running shoes, and you're talking, some snow like this, and you don't know what's underneath. I remember falling a couple times, thinking I could have just snapped an ankle.
Right.
And then what? Now I'm in a blizzard with a broken ankle. And that's just all bad. And so by the end of the day, I ended up getting my 20 miles through that thing to my campsite. Turns out I went over the mountains. I had no clue because you can't see, right? I couldn't see more than 30 yards.
So you just did elevation without knowing.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that there was an incline, but that's nothing new.
Right.
And so I'd be hiking on this incline, and I'd look down, and I couldn't see the bottom. It was just white. I'd look up, and you can't see anything. It's just white. I'm like, well, I'm on the trail, so I might as well just keep going forward. And eventually got there. I remember setting up my tent. I actually got there. It turned out to be a car camping campsite, and they had those like cement outhouses. And I sought shelter in one of those and opened it up and sat in there for like an hour. And it reeked. I thought, this is amazing. And then
this is great.
Yeah, I set up my tent, climbed in my sleeping bag, shoved a couple handfuls of trail mix in my mouth because I knew I needed calories, and then I was going to be burning a ton because it's also cold. So in order to keep your body warm, you shiver, right? It was just burning extra calories to create heat. And so I was super deficient and didn't really sleep. It was super cold that night, and so I just shivered most of the night. And when day broke, I got up, and it turned out to be a blue sky day the next day. And I was just upset and packed up all my stuff, let it dry out, packed up my stuff, and then realized my feet were swollen. So they already swelled to size because of the amount of time I was on them and the pressure, right? Over time of hiking on different terrain, your feet swell. But with this, they were also in snow, soaking up all that water. So they swelled about another half size, which created a lot of tension and pressure on my foot within my shoe, let alone these shoes that I had by that point had taken me about 500 miles.
And what shoe, what brand?
Ultras, ALTRA.
And any specific model that you recommend?
Depends on the terrain.
Okay.
I think they've got one called Lone Peak, and they're a little bit more of an aggressive sole. So a lot more for grip, and that works great when you're talking with rocks or loose soil types of things like that. In the desert, I used a different kind that was less aggressive, but I didn't need as much traction.
Same brand?
Same brand. Okay, gotcha. So if that brand is listening, let me know. Reach out.
That's right.
And so they were super tight, and the bottoms of the soles of those shoes were worn really thin. What I didn't know is that the next day, day 4, when I was getting to my resupply point, it was only 16 miles. I was averaging 25. 16 is great. It's a half day. All right. Turned out the 16 was through loose, jagged lava rock on every step. And it would poke through the sole of the shoe into my swollen feet. And it took me 14, 15 hours to go 16 miles.
Painful.
Yeah, average human walks 3 miles an hour. And it took me,
Yeah, you're doing a mile an hour.
About a mile an hour.
Yeah, ouch.
Yeah.
So what about, what was your favorite memory of the trek?
I've got too many.
Yeah, right.
Too many.
So you gave me maybe one story, it doesn't have to be your best story, of something maybe more positive or something that's different. It's very easy to have this was very difficult to overcome, but what about something that was like, I don't know, maybe just euphoric or enjoyable of the trip?
Yeah. And to touch on the other part is, the physical part is hard. It's the mental part, really.
Oh, I bet.
Because you're alone, or at least I was. And so anything that went south fast. And by south, I mean went wrong fast. And I had to figure out solutions to it, or contain my own emotions to think positively. Otherwise, you go through just a negative downward spiral of defeat, and you can't have that back there.
And just like you were saying, the what ifs earlier, you gotta manage that too.
Yeah.
Just like you can just like in business too, the what ifs can kill you.
Yeah.
Because you really don't know.
No.
And just like there's what ifs of driving down the street. I mean, there's a ton of that too. But it's easier when you're comfortable to let those things either creep up on you or it's easy to block them out.
Especially when you have someone to talk to.
Somebody to talk to or a lifeline like, a phone.
Yeah. And I had a phone with me, but just no service.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of useless.
Much.
But for the positive things, there's far more positive than there are negative. No matter how negative it got, any positive I had, whether that be summiting a peak, coming over a ridge, all of that melted away. I didn't think about it. Seeing a mountain in all its glory is just something beautiful, right? And awe-inspiring.
And you earned it. You earned it too.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like you took a train up there or something.
No, I walked there. If I saw Mount Jefferson, it took me 2,000 miles to hike there, But I'll also say that some of the best times I had, there's two that I want to touch on. One is all the times where I'd sit on a mountain ridge and just look. And I would listen, I'd breathe in the air, and I would just reflect. Right? When you're up at those altitudes, you're seeing these grandiose views of massive glacial cutouts of granite from thousands and thousands of years, and it's magnificent. And it makes you realize how small you are. And especially at that elevation, there's no trees, right? So it's just raw rock or soil or, just sapphire blue, water of these lakes that are so clean you can just dip your face in it and drink. It's amazing. The other part would be the people I met. There's people that know about the hike, the trail, and help out the hikers. They're called trail angels, and they'll drop sometimes coolers full of Gatorade or cookies or Rice Krispies, and you don't know they're there. You turn a corner and boom, there's this
pot of gold,
and you open it up and it's like, oh my God. I remember one time I turned a corner and there were these two women on horses and they were setting up a couple chairs and they had a cooler and they looked at me and said, "You a PCT hiker?" I said, "Yeah." "You look like one. You want a burrito and a beer?" I went, "Hell yeah, I do." She goes, "Cool, have a seat." And I sat down, talked to them. They gave me a burrito and a beer. Other people gave me lifts into a town. I had to hitchhike into towns. Others, bought dinner for me, and just, it really restored my faith in humanity. I think I was a little too cynical, and it's amazing what people do, the generosity of people. And that shaped an outlook. There's also another thing where you do something at that distance that's very primal. You can think of it as a migration, right? Our ancestors years and years ago would do something like that, right? Whether they're tracking buffalo or like elk or
just
whatever.
Finding some other place to live.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there was this very powerful, innate, primal response my body gave me and my brain gave me that it's very hard to explain. And even now, I did this in 2015. I mean, even now I get a longing for it every day.
Yeah, I was wondering how you manage these huge ups and downs of the intensity of the hike. How do you manage that just coming back into society?
It's hard. It was hard to communicate with people because I wasn't used to talking to people, especially women. I was just like thrown off,
You and everyone else, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, then I looked homeless. Yeah. So I had this huge beard. I smelled horrible.
I hadn't had a job for 5 months,
yeah, exactly.
obviously.
Yeah, they'd be like, so what do you do? I was like, I lived in the woods. And yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I love it. So what about... one thing I was wondering with your water, did you do a lot of like iodine or, is that Was that kind of your go-to choice, or boiling, or what did you like to do with water?
Neither. I didn't use iodine or boil.
At all?
You can.
Yeah, I've done it. That's what we
you
did.
can do it.
Yeah. It doesn't taste the best.
Doesn't taste good, right? And so I got a little piece of equipment called Sawyer, Sawyer, and it's the Sawyer original. It's about this big. It's a cylinder.
So like 5-6 inches in case somebody's just listening to the podcast.
Yeah, and maybe
2-3 inches wide.
Maybe an inch.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, inch and a half, something like that. And you can put 100,000 gallons through it of water. Wow. Yeah, it's incredible and extremely lightweight. And what I would do is take a smart water bottle and dip it into a lake or a river or a creek or anything that actually had water.
And then just had a filtration, like a microns type of filtration. Yeah.
And then I think a ceramic or charcoal or something like that. And then you screw it in and then you just squeeze the Sawyer bottle through the water, through the filter, and it pops out the other side clean and fresh. But I had to do that either digging in the desert for water or, whatever. I vomited water in the desert after drinking a bunch of it. And with heat stroke, it just got bad.
My brother, Ryan, he's my oldest brother. His son is now going to Philmont, which was the one I was talking about next summer. So, which you have to, it's kind of like a 2-year wait list type of thing. And it's always full. And I'm like, he asked me to come. And I was like, well, I'm not sure with business, taking off because it is told. And this is just 10, 11 days, 2 weeks, something like that. But, there's no contact. It's not like, oh, I'll call you at 9 p.m. It's there. I'll call you in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And not, emails, everything. So that's always kind of interesting to be able to just hit pause on everything for a minute.
Yeah. And you had talked about the change of mental state, right?
For sure.
About 2 weeks into the hike, the chatter in my head went away. Right. And through the desert, I didn't listen to music. I did for the first 2 days and then had a really bad rattlesnake encounter. It wasn't bit, but it got real close. And I was like, all right, fuck that. I'm not listening to music.
I need to be more aware.
Yeah. I need to know my surroundings.
Yeah. I need to use that, in that sense, right? You don't want to just take that away.
Yeah. And all your senses, at least for me, got hypersensitive. I could hear cracks of sticks really far away. I could smell different odors. I could see a little bit better. It was very interesting. I lost where. But everything calmed down, and so mentally, and so you could fixate on an idea for hours. It's incredible. I don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I think it's tough to get to. When my wife and I like to travel quite often. We don't do like these huge travels. We do more like let's go to Ecuador or Colombia, and we do kind of in the middle. We actually have a travel blog called High Class Low Brow. We do about half is pretty nice, half isn't, type of thing. We'll still do like some nice restaurants every once in a while, whatever, but we still like a lot of adventure. And scuba dive and whatever it is. And then maybe 2 nights in a nice place, right? But what happens is I think you kind of have to, if you just get in the weeds of work all the time, it's very difficult to come up with the strategies, your next thing, your next steps with life. And I'm a big fan of planning life, whether it's the next couple of months, a couple of days, or let's literally plan out what's 5-year, 10-year plan. And this is usually more career as well as, am I on the path creatively that I like? Because I have some problems there. If I don't get enough creativeness in me, I kind of start, I wouldn't say burning out, but I need it almost. It's almost like something that it's a battery that has to be recharged.
Sure.
So typically what happens 3-4 days in, there's nothing there. It's still like too much thoughts of tasks that need to be done. I wonder if this got followed up, all that you can't control. You do your best, but you can't. And then what finally happens, it's kind of the fuck it moment of, okay, it's fine. It's working. You left, you're gone. Yeah. Like you're in a different time zone or whatever. You're in a different country. Give it a minute, and like, it's fine. And then you start actually coming up with some real ideas and thoughts. It's really hard to get to. And I wish I could just do it like just tomorrow or something, or just say, I'm not going to work today. I'm going to think. It doesn't quite work that way for me. I have to kind of be gone. And it's usually sometimes in interesting places, getting new experiences. I think it does kind of jumpstart some of the stuff in your brain.
Absolutely. I go out on hikes around here in Austin. If I feel that kind of need, go do a half day, or drive out an hour to Paladurna's Falls. Pedernales,
Pedernales, the Perd.
Yeah, and hike through there. And that, for me, that helps clear out, some of the
chatter,
acidic noise.
Yeah.
And chatter.
Is that your favorite hike that's close to Austin? Or do you have a couple of them that you like?
There's a variety of them. I've gone to a few of them. It's really, that one's nice because it's only an hour and you can get out there and it's pretty empty.
One of the things I've always loved about Austin, so I live here, kind of the Tarrytown area. We have the trail really close. I used to live on Rainy Street before it was Rainy Street. I lived there for about 4 years. There was like 2 bars when I started there, but the front side was Austin downtown-ish. It was usually more a couple blocks. But the back side was Town Lake. So I kind of got, and I grew up in the country, so I got this great merge of and now it's not backcountry stuff, but you have the trail and these trees and people and you just go walk and not have a destination and I'm not a fan of walking on cement. So like to me, like on just dirt feels so much more comfortable on your body. And I just love that about how Austin has kept a lot of that, even with this growth. So let's walk through like, okay, big trek, boom. All right. So now you're founder and CEO of a company. Walk me through like that middle process and how you got started and how that became real.
Sure. So finished the hike. Went back down to San Diego, freaked out, right? I was there a month, freaked out. My mom had retired to a small town outside of Seattle in Washington State. It's a small town called Port Townsend. It's on the Olympic Peninsula. For those viewing, if this is the state of Washington, here's Seattle, and it's a 40-minute ferry ride and then an hour and 20-minute drive to the very tip of the peninsula.
So it's out there.
Oh, it is out there. 10,000 people, average age 57. Deer walk the street, right? They're in your backyard. You can get as close as for me to you. And there's no problem. Not what you would call a booming tech town or really a booming industry town of any sort, right? Except maybe wooden boats. They do a lot of like handcrafted goods. But
some Etsy stores, perhaps.
Yes. You got a lot. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah, because now I'm thinking about what they'll do is like there's people that'll go out and harvest wild berries and then make their own, syrups and sell at the farmers market. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But my mom invited me up there and said, "Hey, look, it's beautiful up here. There's not very many people. Deer walk the street, and they have great coffee.
Great,
and it's in the middle of the woods, pretty much. Why don't you come up here, live with me for a few months?" Down, she had a basement apartment, and kind of readjust to society, and then get a job and use your degree somewhere in Seattle or something like that. And I thought, okay, that sounds pretty good. So I moved up there and needed to get a job. I got a job at a gym, working part-time behind the desk, folding towels, filling water bottles, right? But what it did is it forced me to socialize with a lot of different people. And so it allowed me to start communicating again and talking to them and kind of learning about the town because I had never been there before. And I had this idea for a plant identification app while I was on the PCT because I didn't know what a lot of the plants were around me. I thought, how cool would it be to be able to take a photo and have it identify the plant for you, but then link you with a local nursery so you could buy the plant and have it sent to your house so you can have it in your backyard.
Kind of like there's like the wine apps we have, but let's forget about Mother Earth. We just need to know what wines we have.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's not a plant one. Yeah. A bird one would be cool too, but that might be. There's so many species of that stuff.
Probably do that with bird calls. And there's a couple of them that do plant identification. They're not that great. It also costs a lot because of the image recognition technology.
Right.
And I created wireframes. I hadn't done any of this stuff. I didn't know anything about tech. I didn't know anything about wireframes or UI, UX, like nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
You just knew that it would be cool.
I just thought it'd be cool. Yeah. And so I just designed this stuff and I went down to the Silicon Valley business plan competition and got dead last. Yeah. And I did this pitch. I created a pitch deck that was the first one I had done. And I've spent probably over 40 hours practicing my 10-minute pitch. I'd be at the front desk of this gym. People would walk by and I'd say, "Hey, you got 30 seconds to hear this pitch?" And I'd go into a 10-minute pitch. Right. And I kind of forced them to watch it
sure.
and give me feedback. But then I got dead last, right? And I was crushed and ended up coming back and thinking about it. And there's this business resource center in the town. And it was literally called the Business Resource Center. And so I walked in and said, hey, what kind of business resources do you have? Because I need some help here. And they said, hey, we're having a town hall meeting. Why don't you come in? Right? It's Friday or Saturday, whatever day it was. We're going to talk about positives and negatives of the town. I said, okay, yeah, I'll show up. And I show up. I'm new to this town. I don't want to really participate. So I kind of take a step back. And we broke off into groups. And when we came back, we discussed what we talked about, positives and negatives of the town. The biggest negative that came up was access to local food. I was blown away because there's a lot of agriculture on the peninsula of Washington.
And you're out in a small town like that. You feel like that would just be
exactly
same.
They've
what
got
it would
a co-op. They've got farmers markets, and they had a Safeway, right? The co-op, only 11% of the items in the co-op were local. That's crazy. 89% were not local.
And I bet more than 89% were probably a higher percentage was sold, right? They might have had 11% of the inventory, but that was probably just like little things, not, your meat.
Yeah.
Something you're buy daily, right?
Exactly. And then you also think about what is local. What do you consider local and what does the government consider local?
Sure.
Whether it be city, state, or federal, right? In Washington, local's the state of Washington. It's a relatively big state, right? With Texas, it's 150 to 200 miles. That's considered local. Yeah. I thought about it like, well, we have all these people, all this food around us, these local farms. Why isn't it happening? So I started asking questions, and they said, well, we've got farmers markets, but it's Wednesdays at noon. Who can go to a farmer's market midweek, midday?
And how much are you actually going to sell a Wednesday at noon only? Like, I'm going to base my whole business around that? Like,
yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah. And then Saturdays from 8 to 1. And so most people would go to the farmer's market on Saturdays. But if you've got a couple kids, I don't have any kids, but my co-founder does, right? And he wasn't my co-founder at the time. His name is Mark. He's my CTO, co-founder and CTO. He's my first customer, actually. Yeah. And so they said, well, if you got a couple kids, you're not there at 8 o'clock in the morning. It takes a while to get some kids out the door, from what I hear.
Right.
So they'd get there at maybe 10, 11, but by that time, all the good stuff's gone. And so it's great to be able to meet your local producers, but if you can't get the items, what's the point? So they kept going to Safeway because it's cheap, all right? It's open 24/7, highly convenient, low cost, just not local. But they're like, all right.
Good enough,
right? So I'm thinking, that's interesting. And I walk home from this meeting, of course, because I've just been walking. And I didn't have a car at the time. And it was about a 2-mile walk. And I walk home. It was June of 2016. And I look over at one of my neighbors, and they've got an apple tree loaded with apples. I'm thinking, why can't we just buy from our neighbors? Like, that guy seems to have a shit ton of apples. So I just knocked on his door. And I said, hey, he answered. I said, hey, my name's Sam. I happened to walk by, saw you got an apple tree. You ever thought about selling your apples? Like, what the fuck are you doing in my yard? I was like, oh, shit. And I said, hey, I got this idea. I work behind the desk at a gym. If I can get someone to buy your apples, will you sell them? Like, yeah, kid. Sure. That's weird. It's like, sweet. And then next day, sitting at the desk at this gym, everyone that walked by, yo, you want some apples? I got them. Very black market produce, right?
There you go.
And sold 2 pounds for $6. I was like, cool, I'll be here tomorrow. $6 cash. And they're like, cool. So I knocked on the guy's door. I said, hey, I got someone to buy your apples. Here's $5. And I get 2 pounds. He's like, yeah, sure. There's a ladder. Go up and get them.
Yeah.
God, all right. So I collect them. I had a scale, weighed them all out. Next day, brought it. They paid me $6. So I made $1, right? Which is also 20%.
Yeah, 20%. Right? Yeah, I was going to say, who cares about the dollar?
Exactly.
It's 20%.
It's 20%. And that's what I based the whole model off. So I was like, fuck it,
like 20% sounds
20%,
good.
And it started from there. And so I just started knocking on my neighbors' doors. I was at my mom's house. I just walked across the street, knocked on the door, went next. That started taking up a lot of time, right? And I also knocked on a lot of doors where people didn't garden. This originally just started a backyard garden. So I started using Google Maps to get a bird's eye view, right? And look into people's backyard. It's a little creepy, but I looked into people's backyards and I could see geometric patterns that would show gardens.
You were doing market research.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. and I would click on it and it would give me their address. And so I just knock on the door and say, hey, do you garden?
Right. And you already knew they did.
Yeah. And
at least hopefully in the last year they did when the Google Map photo was
That's
taken.
very true, because I went to a few where they didn't anymore.
Sure.
And over time, over a 3-month period, I delivered 300 pounds of produce on my bicycle. All this was manual, right? Cash transactions, money envelope, deposit envelope, right? I was breaking bills. I was biking 50 miles a week. I created a Wix website. I got a Wix website and a domain name, veggievinder.com, because Vinder, they wanted like $7,000 at the time. And I was working part-time behind a desk, making $12 an hour.
Right.
And I had $27 in my bank account. And so I got a Wix website and a domain name for $18.58. And that's how it started. Then I created this thing. They would create a little form and submit it, and I would get it. And I would call all my neighbors or email them. Hey, do you have 2 pounds of onions? Hey, do you have blah, 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 blah. And I would source it and then ride my bike over, pay for it, ride my bike to the next one, pay for it, come back, aggregate at my house, and then deliver, or in my house, my mom's basement apartment, and deliver it to the end user.
I bet people are loving this. They're like, this is awesome.
Kids screamed in happiness and joy when I showed up, and it was weird. It was weird because they'd be like, yay, vegetables.
Yeah,
because of the taste.
It was really, yeah. Like I said, I grew up in the country, so we had a garden.
Mm-hmm.
We had about an acre, but our garden was an acre. But like my thing was radishes. I don't think people know what radishes taste like.
Yeah.
They've dumbed them down so bad. I'm like, I like the spicy, super intense radish because it's what we had.
Yep.
I like the radish you buy it at the store, and you're like, this is not a radish.
Yeah.
It's just not even close.
It's also old. Well, that's the thing. Like the supply chain in the U.S. food system is it's phenomenal at large scale.
And you need that part.
You have to a degree.
Yeah.
Right. Apples can be 6 months to a year old. Lettuce is about 2 weeks old off the shelf.
Wow.
And that's why it goes bad so quick in your refrigerator. If you get lettuce, if you harvest lettuce from like your garden, it'll stay for 2-3 weeks, and the nutrients start fading from the product as soon as it's cut. And so what was interesting is that my neighbors, they'd cut it the day of. And so we were getting about from when it was cut to when it was delivered, like an hour or less.
Right.
You can't find fresher produce unless you grow it yourself. And when I meet these people, I knock on their door and they say, yeah, I've got a garden. Sure, I'm willing to sell a few things. And I say, cool, can you give me a tour? I didn't know anything about gardening. I didn't know anything about agriculture. And I had a notebook and I would take notes, right? And I'd get my hand in the soil and just learn about it and learn different types of growing methods, hydroponic, aeroponic, aquaponic, all these in-ground, raised bed, whatever it might be. And I started taking notes. And I'd come home and I'd create a Google Doc, right? Like a Word doc of their profile. And I would take a photo and I'd place it on this picture and I'd have who they were, like their location. Obviously, it's the town is within a 5-mile radius. All the different products that they grew. And I would put it all in a manila folder and hand it over like a top secret, dossier. With their goods. And what they really liked that is what I noticed. And they would see all their food and then they'd be able to open up this dossier and see exactly who grew what, right? And since they were all people at the gym pretty much, they all knew each other too.
Yeah.
And they're like,
it's cool.
Oh man, they would start to meet each other. And I thought, okay, there's potential here.
Yeah, this is fun. Yeah, there's community here, people liking it.
Bingo.
The product's interesting.
How do I scale?
Yeah. How do I get, it sounds pretty low tech at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Post-it notes everywhere,
How do we make it real?
Bingo. How do I make it real? So Mark, my co-founder now and CTO, he's 47. He's got a wife and 4 kids, right? And he had a web development company for 20 years. So he knows about it. And so I said, hey, I know you do web stuff. At the time, I didn't know anything about it. Would you be willing to be an advisor for me? Formal advisor. And before that, I didn't know. I looked at some stuff on YC's website and printed out a contract. I didn't have a lawyer. And handed it to him. He reviewed it and said, yeah. And so with his help, I hired a guy to build out a website. I designed the website. I didn't know anything about web design. I just took aspects from other ones that I liked, put it all together using Photoshop, and then sent it over to the guy. And in order to get it built, I saved about 80% of my paychecks, and I live off a little under $200 a month, right?
Wow.
Yeah, it was like people talk about ramen, right?
Yeah.
Being ramen profitable. Fuck, dude, that can add up, right? Like one of those ramen packs is 25 cents.
Right.
I'll eat like 2 or 3 of them. I was also at the gym, and to make extra money, I was teaching fitness classes. So I'm burning calories, and I've only got a couple $100 for the month to replace myself. Yeah. Right. Ramen, 75 cents a meal. So what? A couple bucks a day, right? If I'm just eating ramen, well, I can spend $5 on some rice, right? On 5 to 10 pounds of rice, and that should last me 3 weeks.
Right. Sure.
So I'd have to work it somehow. But saving that money, I put it all towards this developer, and he developed this website, veggievinder.com, as a marketplace.
What made you believe in it that much to basically sit there and say, okay, I'm willing to take a really hard cut on all my life, food as well as just comforts, or just in general to sit there and say, let's go forward, let's do this. Like, was there a apex moment that happened, or a certain client said something, or did you just kind of say it just kind of happened organically?
Yeah.
Pun intended, I guess.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that growth, organic, all of that rolls into agriculture. And it all did. It all happened organically. You see, at the time, I was working part-time at this gym. I had a lot of time on my hands. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had a lot of time. And I could see the community connection. I met my neighbors. I had built this community. I never felt more connected. Right? Our tagline's neighbors feeding neighbors is because that's exactly what it is. It was home gardeners at the time just giving their access to their neighbors. Right? And it was just so powerful. I thought, why not pursue that? So I had the website built. We launched, and people started signing up, right? These home gardeners started signing up, this previous clientele I had. And the profile dossiers then went digital. And they started, put a profile photo. What goes into your soil? What kind of amendments go into it, right?
So you had like a mini community.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could see whether they do home compost, mushroom compost, whatever additives they put in, they would mark it all, what their growing what their growing techniques were, and the list of the other products. And so you could click on your local seller, and boom, see an exact profile. You can also see pins on the map of where they were. It was super rad. And we launched this. People started signing up. But what happened was they would meet each other, because before that, it was me doing it, right? So when I took that step back to think about how do I get this to scale, a lot of it came down to logistics, where I was biking 50 miles a week, and I was like, no, I can't do that, right? I actually put in an application for this business competition, and they declined us because they said it's not a scalable business, right? And I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense.
It's not scalable at its current form.
You have to have vision.
So when you went to the business competition and they rejected you, like, so was that kind of motivational for you, or was it frustrating, or was it
both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did it make you want to give up, or?
No, I just thought, okay, cool. Then I got to fix that.
Right. Yeah. You actually gave me some information then.
Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah. That's a great way of looking at it.
Awesome. I didn't know shit. And these are business people being like, yo, it doesn't scale. You got to figure that out.
Come back.
Right.
That's cool.
And so I thought, okay. And we made this website, people started signing up, creating profiles. And I moved the distribution aspect onto the customers. So we created a user-based distribution system.
And real quick, I'm going to jump in and sorry, but I think there's something important there. A little token is instead of taking that as just some negative feedback, you actually, or being like a perfect, well thought out, perfect plan to present to these people, you just presented what you had. You might have thought it was perfect, but you went and just did it without instead of thinking like 3 years later, I'm going to do this when everything's already worked out and looks perfect. You're like, let's just go present it and then take their feedback and then enhance your product.
Yeah. I mean, it also helped that they were offering $20,000,
Sure.
So I was like, but that's exactly it. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Why not just put your name in the hat?
Right. Sure. So then now you made you push it back to your customers to kind of make some kind of a distro model.
User-based distribution system. Yeah. So the reason I thought about that was like, these are random people that I'd knock on their door and they would let me come back and like pick stuff up from them. Right. They didn't really know me. So I thought, well, why wouldn't they just let the person who's paying them pick it up?
What's the difference?
What's the difference? Sometimes they didn't want that. Sometimes the seller didn't want me to come by. Privacy. And I was like, I get that. So they would drop it off. And I thought, well, why don't you just drop it off to the person who's buying it, right?
Right, sure.
Set your own delivery fee. So they did. And what was so cool is that it started working, right? Now, this is also a rural community. So it's not much like a major metro like Austin, right? Rural community, you're talking 5 miles diameter.
But a lot less
slower
people,
pace,
a lot less people in 5 miles.
Yeah.
Because you would need a higher percentage of the people in that 5 miles, whereas in a city, you might get a lower percentage, but more people.
Yeah, but it's also their frame of mind. They don't mind walking down the street to pick up their stuff. They don't mind driving a few minutes, right? The closest town from Port Townsend Port Townsend doesn't have a Walmart or any big box stores. Closest Walmart's 45 minutes away. You want to go do a 45-minute trek,
I'm from the middle of Kansas, so yeah, I mean, I get it. So small, like nowhere, you want to go, you have a town and then there's another town an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. But people in a major metro area, there's no way, man. Driving 15 minutes, that's a massive inconvenience, right? You got to cross a freeway. Good luck. So that transition was interesting, but at the time, from Port Townsend to Austin, Texas. But at the time, it was working. People would go to their neighbor and pick up the onions and carrots or apples or figs, all these different things. It was just backyard home gardeners at the time. They started meeting neighbors they never knew. And they started creating a community, right? I learned that this woman, Kelsey, purchased from this guy, Chris, right? And he ended up living about half a mile from her. And so she was making dinner one night and was like, well, let me go on Vinder and see what's available. Chris is half mile away selling carrots and onions. Walla Walla onions, just this big, right? I've never seen them that big since. And he was like, man, I just can water them to see what happens. So she places an order. He accepts it. Kelsey walks down at Chris's place, right? It's half a mile, 10 minutes to go pick him up. But Chris didn't have time to harvest. So he goes, hey, Kelsey, would you like to see where they're being grown?
Mm-hmm.
And then for the first time in Kelsey's life, she saw where her food was being grown. He said, look, here are your carrots. Reach in and grab the ones you want.
Fun.
Yeah. And she reached in the soil, pulled out the carrot she was going to eat that night, and it changed her perspective of our food system from then on.
And she had a whole story now. Like, now you have a story of these carrots.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Story of the carrots. She knows a new neighbor. She knows where her food came from. She knows how fresh it is. She's the one that pulled it out. Like, it was incredible. And these stories kept popping up over and over and over again. And I went, wow, okay. So I resubmitted to the Silicon Valley Business Competition, the one I had just gotten last in the year before, right? We go down there, pitch, make the semifinals, make the finals, take first place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We went from last to first. right? And we got a $10,000 grant. I thought, phenomenal. Silicon Valley Business Conference. I call up the local newspaper of Port Townsend. I say, hey, this is Sam Lillie of Vinder. We just swept the Silicon Valley Business Competition. She goes, who are you? So I started explaining. She goes, oh, that's really cool. And so we got into the news. And at the time, I was listening to a ton of podcasts about Uber, Airbnb, Masters of Scale, that type of thing, the lean startup I was reading, and just as much as I can consume. And what the Airbnb guys did was the same thing. They took local news and then took that and brought it to the regional news and took that and brought it, just PR, grew and grew and grew from there. So, well, fuck it, I'll just do that. It's a blueprint.
No, that is literally how you do PR. That's one of the best ways of doing it.
Yeah, and I had no clue, right? All right, so I did that, went to the next one. We got into the regional newspaper, made front page, and then took that and brought it out to Seattle. The Seattle Times picked us up, right? Boom, we got in the Seattle Times. From there, 2 news stations took their crews and vans and drove 2 hours to meet us, right? And our neighbors of home gardeners, right? That are creating this food system where neighbors feed neighbors. And they just loved it. And we'd had segments. I'd never been on TV before. It was blowing my mind. I'm still working behind the desk at the gym,
making $12 an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And it started growing. So once it released, within 4 months of launching the website, we'd organically grown into about 90 cities in 19 states. Yeah, I was tripping out, right? Again, still behind the desk at this gym. And it was very, very, I would go and I'd meet people out in Seattle. I would drive to as many of them as I could so I can meet them. I do it still here in Austin, right? I know every seller on our app from here to Dallas to Houston. I've met them. I've worked their farms. I'm not a farmer, but I'll go out and I'll do low tunnels and build greenhouses and plant or weed or, whatever I need to do to help them. I want to be involved because that's what it's about. It's about the community involvement of it. And so this thing started growing and getting crazy, and we started applying to more competitions, and it's not like we won or even got accepted into a lot of them, right? After the Silicon Valley Business Competition, I applied to probably 20-something until I got the next one where we got the ability to compete, right? Which was South by Southwest Food and City. Yeah, we placed top 15 in the world for agricultural supply chain innovation, beating out 600 companies from about 19 countries.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And I was over the moon, and that was the first time that brought me to Austin. I kind of got a little feel for it. I was at South by, crazy, Capital Factory, free 3 meals a day.
Yeah, and it's South by, it's March. It's gorgeous here. That's how I moved here. I came from March and South by, and then I went back home, and 5 weeks later I moved.
Yeah,
I owned 2 businesses. I sold it at a house, sold it, rolled out. I was like, that's where I want to live.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think a lot of other people do that too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we got 125 people a day.
Yeah, I know, right?
So that was super interesting. And then we got into this thing and Mass Challenge, the business accelerator here. They reached out and said, hey, we saw you're a top 15. We'd like to recommend you apply for this accelerator. Now, again, I've been listening to all these podcasts, right? It's all about YC and accelerators and Techstars. I thought, okay, right? Now, at the time, for me to learn anything about tech businesses, how they grow, all of that stuff. Remember, I'm in a rural town. Mm-hmm. I would wake up at 3 a.m. I would take 2 buses, a ferry to get into Seattle, and then a ferry to get into Seattle. And once I got into Seattle, I'd take 2 more buses so I can go to a Angel Network 1-hour class on how to value your company, or like how to raise angel money.
And did you even have a car yet at this time?
No, 2 buses, a ferry, and 2 buses.
That's what it sounded like.
3 a.m. I'd get back at 8 o'clock at night for a 1-hour class.
Yeah. And by the way, this is just a couple years ago, right? We're not talking like this was 1999. This
2017.
Is exactly. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to be watching the video and knowing that your age. That we're not talking like this was in the 80s. This is yesterday, basically.
Yeah, 2016, I was on bicycle. 2017, we had won the Silicon Valley Business Competition. 2018, we got into the Mass Challenge Accelerator.
Gotcha.
Right? I think Entrepreneur Magazine rated them top 15 in the world for accelerator programs. And I thought, holy shit, this is it. Again, I'm living in my mom's basement, right? Making this thing work on a bicycle. And I was like, well, we got in. I got to move. Well, I guess I better raise money.
Yeah. Austin's a little more expensive than
exactly.
rural town.
Exactly. But we also noticed certain things we needed in the program, in the system, in the software, right? Like farmers, they're out in the field. They're not on a computer.
Right.
So they need something in their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, all right, how do we develop apps? Right? And where do I get funds to develop apps? What's all that look like? So I started taking classes and reading books and, figuring it out. And then started looking for investors. And the first investment I got was a $15,000 check his name is Lee. And he was a member at the gym.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. So my co-founder, member at the gym, he walked by, said, hey man, would you want some apples? He bought them. And so he got tied in. My co-founder did at that time. People ask me about how do you find co-founders? I talk to people, talk to them, get them to use your product if you have one. And so it tied him in. He knew about it. He got this connection to community. The people at the gym that saw me build this thing from when I was on bicycle to a website. I mean, I'd be on the computer at the gym. I'd always close, right? And there'd be no one else there and just me, no managers. And they said, hey, if you can get, make sure the members are fine and everything's taken care of, then you can work on Vinder. And so I'd sit there and make sure everything's good, and I'd work and work and work and work. And they saw that. And then we had our two first investments came from the gym. Blew my mind. I moved down to Austin with a little less than $75,000 and started building the apps, and then started raising more money and, doing that thing, going through the accelerator and the roller coaster of emotions that is building a startup from the ground up, right? Building mobile apps, not knowing anything about it. Luckily, my co-founder does, right? But then you're also limited with cash. So then, how good a quality of a person can you get? Sure. There's all those dynamics to it.
And when you were building these apps, I mean, obviously your co-founder had a lot more knowledge there. Was there any kind of aha moments or items that you know now that you wish you would have known when you started that process?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about agile development.
Oh, agile. Yeah, agile is a great framework. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we started using that, right? And I wish we would have started that from the beginning. We use that now, and it's phenomenal. Not anyone that's trying to build an app, especially for the first time, learn agile development. It's going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars and lots of time and heartache. And then just saves you a lot of time from just overthinking about where you are, because you'll know exactly where you are.
And do you have a process like with agile? It's common. Do you meet in the mornings and kind of go through an exercise? Is it weekly? Like what? Walk me through that kind of process a little bit more of an actual like day to day.
Sure, we've got a Scrum board and Kanban, and we do sprint backlog, sprint. What we do is we sit down and if we're about to start a sprint, we do sprint planning. And that can last from 1 to 4 hours, where I'm sitting with the development team. I'm paying them for their time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already listed out all the items of priority that I wanted. Then they go through each one of them and label who's going to do each one of the. Well, first they go through and they put an estimate about how much time each one of those tasks is going to take. Once they have that, then they put who would do that task, right? And then we would move that I would take the tasks from the backlog, put it in the sprint backlog, and item of priority. They then go through the sprint backlog. While they're doing that, they're asking questions. Mm-hmm. They're flushing out all those individual tasks, which is exactly what I want, because I don't want them to have those questions during development, right? So we spend the 4 hours doing that, flushing it out. And then they know that they've got 2 weeks. That's the set time frame sprint. It's a 2-week sprint. And then they would just take the tasks that they knew that they could get done in that time period and move it into the sprint, including time for QA and fixing of any broken
bugs.
code.
Yeah, there's always bugs. I think that's a great, that's a process. Programmers, like a lot of people, they love ownership. They love to go through that process. You're making almost like they're a part of the business. They're not just the worker. They are chatting through this with you, with the one of the owners of the company. And whereas your competition of where they could go work, yeah, maybe the pay is different or better, but they only get a small piece of the whole. Like they're going to have a lot of ownership of this app, of this process, or whatever they're building, and that's powerful.
Yeah,
it's very powerful.
Yeah, in positives and negatives.
Sure. Yeah.
When we originally started, we had 2 guys internally, right, and that worked great for a little bit, and then there were, disputes, just internal disputes, thinking that the development of it is like the app itself is the business. It's not. It's an extension of it.
It's just like how a telephone is for your business. It's a means of communication.
That's it.
Yeah, it's not just the company. That's
That's it. Yeah. So, and that was all interesting. And I had never run a company before. I've never hired anyone, doing all that. And so learning all of that on the fly fucking sucks, right? But you just do it and you learn about it. You read books on communication, right? And so we started building from there. After the sprint ends, right? We're talking about agile development. After the sprint ends, we do a retrospective. And that could take 2 hours. And we go through it all. What went well? What didn't? What can we improve on? What can we take out? And so we reflect on it, both from the workers, but also from a manager's perspective, right? How can we as managers communicate better, right? Because that's a lot of it comes down to communication. And then right after we do the retrospective, we hop right into another sprint planning. So we just shut that down, go into the sprint planning, plan out the next 2 weeks, and then I only have a 15-minute meeting every morning. That's it. I know what's getting done. I know who's doing what. I don't need more than that. They say, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I've done. Here are my blockers.
Right. And then you're able to do other things in the business.
Yeah. And I'm not worried about it. Yeah. My CTO is taking care of it, but it's like, okay. It doesn't feel like the wheels are spinning and you're not going anywhere.
Right.
Where before, when I didn't implement the system, I didn't know what was getting done. I'd ask every day. I didn't understand the amount of time certain tasks or features or things like bugs take to get fixed or implemented. And this broke it out in a very clear-cut, formulated way.
And that way and you can move on, like in your head, even in your brain. Even if we say, we forget about all the question back and forth and all that, how that is ineffective or inefficient, I should say. It's also just great to say, okay, that's gone. I don't need to think about that now. Like it's out there. We know where we're at. So I think you gave me a great story of how things got started in your transition. So what part of the story are we at now? Like where are we at, and what does the future hold?
Yeah, this is exciting. So where we are now it's much different. Not too much, but what we've done is expanded categories, product categories. It's not just backyard gardeners anymore, right? We moved to Austin, Texas, from a rural community, right? And so that was in the Pacific Northwest, down here where it's warm, where I went from a 3-month growing season to almost a 12-month growing season.
Yeah, it's way different soil, everything's
products,
different.
Everything's different. Yeah. Laws are different around this, right?
Yeah.
Distribution is different. Rural town to a major metro, right? Willing to drive 10 minutes, not willing to drive 4 minutes, right? Or across a freeway.
Yeah. Or logistics is nuts. Yeah, I'm sure.
But also produce, you don't get a lot of money from produce. Average U.S. citizen spends about $16 a week on produce.
Yeah.
It's not much, so it's like, how do you expand your AOV, your average order value, right? How do you put in more products? How do you bring in higher quantity of products? We're just home gardeners. Home gardeners don't produce a lot, right? It's mainly for them. So we started expanding into farmers, farms, small farms, urban farms, Eden East. It's,
there's a lot. We're
5
lucky
acres.
here in Austin. There's a plethora of fantastic farms that you could also like spend a Saturday morning like going in there, and it's a cool experience. It's a lot of fun.
Exactly. And I didn't know any of that when I moved here. We moved here because of the program. That was it.
Yeah. So it was a great extra.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then from there we started expanding not only into farms, but we brought in meats, proteins, whether it be Longhorn beef, to Wagyu, Black Angus, whatever that might be, but also into cottage industry goods.
Yeah.
What are you familiar with cottage industry?
Well, I'm lactose intolerant, so not really, but
So cottage industry it's in all 50 states. And it goes back, it's innate in us as humans, but also Americans. I mean, it allows you in the cottage industry to make goods at home and sell direct to consumer.
Oh yeah, I actually do have a little bit of knowledge of this. You could do up to so much pounds or dollars or whatever it is. There's some rules around this, right?
Yep. Each state is different.
So where I grew up, it's so funny how much I'm talking about this, but so we'd have like cream delivered to our door. Right.
Yep.
We were that old school, like milk and cream with like the milkman. Although
How
it wasn't a
good was
milkman, it was the farmer or whatever. He was just friends with my mom and like brought it over. Right.
How good was it?
Well, I was really young at the time, but I'm sure I'm amazing. Like,
Yep.
I mean, just, you don't know, but
Yep. So that's exactly what it is. So in Texas, under Texas cottage food law, you can sell up to $50,000 direct to consumer out of your home kitchen without a business license.
wow, that's a huge chunk.
It's a lot. And a lot of it, it's not hot meals. Can't be refrigerated either. Right. So there's a specific list of products that you're allowed to sell, right? It's limited. Not to say that limited is a small number, right? You're talking cakes, breads, jams, honey, eggs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's a massive amount of products on that cottage industry list. Pickles, kimchis, you can all do. All in your home kitchen, up to $50,000 direct to consumer. If you're making bread, that's a lot of dough.
Yeah. Pun intended again.
Pun intended, yeah. But I mean, think about it. It doesn't take that long to bake some bread. The longest time is when it's in the oven.
Right.
Right. So what do you think would be better? Driving for Uber and sitting in Austin traffic, right? Or having a beer and making some bread at home?
Or what if you're into it, right? You make some amazing agave, right?
Yeah.
Which I would pay really good money for good agave, right? Because I prefer that over syrup or whatever.
Yep.
And that can last a long time. So if I spent $25 on a bottle of agave, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Like,
and you know that the money's going to someone local. So here in Austin, the average distance between buyer and seller is 10 miles. That's hyper local, right? I got a guy who delivers bread and I get it at my house and it's warm. And he makes it in his kitchen and he just enjoys baking. It's a hobby for him, but he gets to make some extra money.
yeah, and I think I go back to that. I think there's a kind of cool story here. I think we do this with, wines. I think it's a great, and beer now too. That, the story of how it's made and this and that is almost, people buy that almost more than the actual taste of the wine, because it's very hard to, some people are going to really know the taste, but if you could attach a story to something, I think it becomes more valuable in your head somehow.
Attach a story, attach a face.
Yeah, even way stronger there.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Meet your neighbor. You get to see them.
Yeah.
The guy drops the bread off. It's hot. The thing looks like it came out of Game of Thrones. And like I'll eat half a loaf right there because it's just so delicious, and it goes back again to the creating a neighbor-made food system. Neighbors feeding neighbors, whatever it might be.
So what about if I didn't want to drive? Because I'm not a big fan. Say I love to bake the bread, but I'm not a fan of delivering it.
Yeah.
And what if I don't even want, I don't want a bunch of random people to pick it up. So is there a kind of a thought process to feed that need?
Yeah, they could put pickup locations. They can set their own pickup locations, right?
it.
Like I've picked up some spices, right, from this guy in an HEB parking lot,
Right.
right? And I picked up a pecan pie in a Torchy's parking lot. Does it seem weird? A little bit, but you know what? That's the best food I've ever had,
Right.
and I trust it more than I do that at a grocery store.
And I think there could be some synergies, some down to way down the line. Say, partner with like a Walgreens or some or 7-Eleven, some kind of store, and there's a locker or whatever it would be, perhaps down the line. But it makes complete sense right now of option A, B, or C. But to me, it sounds like the point is just trying to get the two people together in a way, shape, or form. I bake bread. I want bread. Let's cut out the middle person. Get you guys together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's full transparency. Everything that's going forward, right, in the food realm, people want transparency. And you don't get that at the grocery store. You have built-in trust out of repetition, right? You just are used to going to the grocery store to pick up your stuff. I challenge anyone listening to this to go to their grocery store and go to their produce manager and ask them where some of the produce came from, right? And say, hey, do you know what farm that came from? They probably won't be able to tell you the farm or the farmer or what went into the soil, which then goes into the food, which then goes into you. They might be able to tell you the country.
Wow, that's interesting. And, you don't think about that as much, and I think that's I definitely see where you're headed with that. So, what about the like Blue Aprons of the world? Do you see that as competition or just completely separate?
I think it's different. They're prepackaged meal kits. They also source from all over the country, where we are within 10 miles.
Right.
It's all homemade. It's right from your neighbors. These aren't, 1,000-acre farms. These are people in their backyards. I mean, some of them even here in Austin, they're urban farms where you can make on a quarter acre of land $100,000.
Wow.
Farming in your back. I know multiple people here in Austin that do that. Get a peach tree, right? It doesn't just make peaches, it makes leaves that you can dehydrate and crush and put them into tea bags and sell for peach tea.
That's interesting.
Right? And they sell for $12 and people buy them. And you've just raked up not only leaves, but money, right?
Olive oil would be a big one. We go all day.
Pickles.
Yeah.
Take a cucumber. It sells for $1 at the farmer's market, cut in half. Take that half, cut in 4s, put it water, vinegar, salt, and some garlic. Now you got pickles, and they sell for $8.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting places to go. To get back on the business, just a couple last questions because we're probably getting up to your time here. So, what's your approach? No, I'm good on time all day long. So, what's your approach to marketing? So, how do you get this in more people's minds? How do they become more aware of it?
Yeah, a lot of it's we do marketing through Instagram influencers, partnering with various organizations to affiliate marketing.
And how do you find those influencers? Is that something just manually done, or are you using a service?
Manually done.
I think that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
I don't think you have to use a service. It doesn't take long. You just don't be lazy.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's like, why would I want to know if that's a person's going to rep my brand. I want to know who they are. I want to know what they're posting. I want to follow them for a minute too.
I just bought their groceries.
Oh, well, there you go.
Hey, let me buy your groceries for the week, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I love it. It's such a different world because you actually have a physical product, but the physical product isn't some like skewed item. And I think that's what you're against, right? Is the skewed apple is an apple is an apple. You're like, well, let's actually talk a lot about,
exactly.
Exactly. Where it comes from.
Distribution, cost. You're buying from multiple people, right? How do you then aggregate an individual order from 3 to 4 different sellers and have it delivered to the consumer in a timely manner at a monetary cost that doesn't hurt their wallet, right? And when you're buying from 3 or 4 people, that gets tricky.
Yeah.
It gets real tricky. So, but we've got a solution. You asked what's coming up in just a few months. I can't dive into too many details on this, but in a few months, you'll be able to order, have it delivered to your house in an hour, all aggregated for $5.
That'll be a game changer when you talk about the scalability for you, because convenience of a grocery store is tough, and I don't think you have to beat that. But if you can and I love just being at my house and ordering stuff. So I don't care about the hour. You can give me 4 hours; it's fine with me. But if I can just order at my house, that'd be.
But most people, like Whole Foods, offers 2-hour delivery.
Sure.
So is HEB.
Right.
So how do you become more convenient than your local grocery store?
So what does What does your company name mean?
Vinder actually means someone who experiences the world around them through their senses. Now, I didn't know that when I chose it.
Really? Because that would mean to me, like with your hike, that would seem like.
I originally called it Vinder,
okay,
for vegetable finder.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
And
I got it printed, and everyone said Vinder, and I was like, no, it's Vinder. Like Vinder, and I thought, well, all right, easier for me to change how I say it than to change them. Then I looked it up, got that definition. I thought that's phenomenal. It's exactly kind of what we are. If you're a vendor, you're experiencing your world, your community.
Yeah.
Through your senses, touch, the feel of homegrown produce, the warmth of a freshly baked loaf of bread, the smell of it, the taste of it when it just melts in your mouth, or you get the crunch from a crisp, crust or something like that. And your pupils dilate, and it's a full sensory experience. What I also like is people say, well, it's like Tinder for veggies. So it makes it easy to remember. And I think, we'll hook you up with your local farmer.
It works that way too. All right. So last question. How would you like to be remembered?
Oh. I don't know if I'd want to be remembered as like a giant visionary or anything like that. Maybe just a connector. For me, Vinder's never been about me at all. Vinder's always been about the community, the connection, I built this thing to solve a problem for my community. That's the only reason. And since then it's grown, and I've seen it grow in over 100 cities across the nation. If how I'd like Vinder to be remembered is a company that brought an old way of living that we used to have for hundreds of years and allowed that to reemerge and bring that style back into our community using 21st century technology. It's something that can happen in every society, and it's something that brings, in a world that's so divided right now, it allows us to bring people together through food. What's more human than that, And that's where I see it. I want it to be a neighbor-made grocery store that's owned by the people. We ran an equity crowdfunding campaign, raised over almost like $160,000 through it. It turned us into a high-tech food co-op. We really are a food system owned by the people on the grand scale. I don't see anything better than that. The people taking back their food system.
I love it. I think it's a great way to end the podcast. Sam, it was a big pleasure to have you on. Very interesting.
Thanks,
I love it. Cheers, man.
Thank you very much.